Hi, today I'm going to do something very different from my videos. I'm actually going to give you a bit of a book review, which is my thoughts on this book, which is The Lost Art of Running, A Journey to Rediscover the Forgotten Essence of Human Movement by Shane Benzie with Tim Major, published by Bloomsbury Publishers. Now, I actually got this book a while ago now, over a month ago now, and I've read it pretty much in the first week of having it. So it's taken me a little while to actually decide whether I was going to do this, but do it I am. Now, this is in essence a book about running technique, which may or may not appeal to you. It depends. I mean, if you're a running technique coach like me, then it would. Or even if you're just an ordinary runner, but you're thinking about maybe that you need a little bit of work on your running technique, then this is also a good book to buy, I think. It's different to others that I've had in the past, and these are some of the others that I have, which cover running technique, some in more detail than others. Obviously this one very much so. But the difference is that things like this are a little bit more sciencey, if you like, a little bit more academic in nature and tone. So it reads a bit more like a term paper for a degree program or something like that, whereas this book is much more accessible, and it's basically littered throughout with anecdotes from ultra runners that Shane has worked with, and it also covers Shane's exploits and journeys around the world to actually work with top class athletes and indigenous people to explore and examine how they move, and then formulate his opinions about running technique from there. And actually some of the ultra runners that Shane has worked with are pretty top class athletes, the likes of Damien Hall, Nicky Spinks, the marvellous Mimi Anderson, Tom Evans, Pavel Polonsky, Robbie Britton, Rory Coleman, people like that. If you know anything about ultra running, then you probably would have heard of those names, or at least some of them, or you should have done. And Damien Hall actually gives a good quote on the back of the book, which is, "Shane is the Indiana Jones of the running world." And I like that, and it really sums up exactly Shane's approach to finding out about running and human movement, because he has basically visited pretty much every corner of the globe in his quest. He's been to places that you would expect, like Ethiopia, Kenya and Morocco in Africa, to study the top class runners there, but he's also been to Peru to look at indigenous people there, and also in Nepal, where he's basically studying the movement of those people that haven't been influenced by the things like we have in the West with running shoes and other sports technology companies, and their movement is more natural, if you like. But he's also been to the Arctic Circle and has monitored people doing multi-day ultra events, so in the Amazon and also in the Arctic Circle in Sweden. He's been to Czechoslovakia, India, Nepal, Bahrain, France and the UK as well, obviously, and he's based in the UK. I should say as well that I've actually met Shane, and I've had some training from Shane a little while ago now, and at that time he actually told me he was writing this book and it would be available for pre-order fairly soon thereafter, and I did pre-order it, and I got it straight away the first day it was published, and I really enjoyed it. And I say the main thing that I really enjoyed about it is the detail about Shane's trips around the world and working with different people, and also those anecdotes from those ultra runners. I think that gives this book a much more accessible and interesting take on things than some of the other books that are on running technique that I've read in the past, as I say. But it does cover everything, and a couple of the big takeaways from this book really are things that are fairly unique to Shane's take on things, on running technique, and that's his concept of tensegrity, which is something I'd never actually heard of before until I actually met Shane. And he's always got a child's toy, a tensegrity model, like this one, I'll put it up here somewhere, that he always whips out and uses to actually explain what this means. And the way that we normally learn about human anatomy in the West is that the skeletal system is the foundation, the scaffolding that everything else hangs off. Whereas the way that the tensegrity model works is that that's not quite the case. The bones do give structure, but they live in a sea of tension that is supplied by things like the muscles and the tendons, ligaments, and fascia. And fascia is another thing that Shane really majors on, if you like. And that makes sense to me, especially the way Shane explains it, using the tensegrity model. It makes a lot more sense than just the bones being the scaffold and everything else hangs off, because the bones will do nothing without everything else, so they all work together in this sea of tension, as Shane explains it. And that makes a hell of a lot more sense than just thinking that the bones are the scaffold and everything else sits off, and the muscles are what moves the bones. Now, fascia is the other thing that comes forward very clearly in the book as being something that we as runners should be utilising a lot more. And fascia is the tissue that wraps every muscle strand and fibre, or every pocket of muscle, and it runs throughout our body, and we have large elements of it that come from the crown of the head right down to the tips of our toes, if you like. And there are several main meridians of it that we can utilise as runners because it's basically like an elastic band, so we can stretch it and let it recoil and get free energy from it, if you like. And because it doesn't require calories to actually operate it, it doesn't require oxygen or blood flow to feed it while we're moving. It basically does just work like an elastic band, stretching and then regaining its shape again. So if we run elegantly tall like your Kipchogis and your Mo Farahs, we get to utilise the elastic recoil from our fascia. But a lot of runners that I see, the everyday runners, don't run like that at all, and we could definitely do with taking a few lessons from Shane and from the elites in that regard. So the book has three main parts to it. The first part is about Shane's journey and how he became involved in studying human movement, and when he transitioned from, he actually started by studying sharks and swimming with sharks and studying their movement, and then he transitioned to human movement after a few failed attempts at ultra races himself and getting injured and what have you, and thinking, actually, after spending a lot of money on tech and expensive socks and shoes and all the other bits and pieces that he thought would give him the advantage, he quite rightly turned his attention to his own running technique, and then he went on a journey all over the world to actually study from the best, if you like, and study from people that have real unadulterated movements, who run like we were meant to run from the outset, who run still like our ancestors run, because we are natural born runners. So that's part one, is about Shane's journey all over the world and actually how he came to formulate each individual part of his theory about running technique, or his knowledge on running technique. Part 2 and 3 actually go into the running technique then in more detail, and it breaks it down with things like foot placement, cadence, stride length, technique for running uphill and downhill, overall posture, head position, arms and shoulders, the natural lean, how we should breathe, and the importance of the mind as well in running, especially in endurance running. Another standout part for me when I met Shane, as well as in the book, is about how important the head positioning is. And he explains it really well in that the head is a big lump. It weighs about 12 pounds, and I can't remember what that is in kilograms. I'll put it up here somewhere. But for every inch forward that comes, and a lot of us do this now, especially from working all day on a laptop or playing with a phone or a tablet most of the evening or whatever, or reading a book even, we have this natural tendency for the head to be brought forward towards what we're actually looking at. But for every inch forward our head sits when we're running, that puts an additional 10 pounds of torsion stress on our spine, and that can really play on you, especially on a long run, in terms of making your shoulders ache, or even right the way down towards your pelvis. Another thing that Shane mentions in the book is the fact that what we do with our bodies all day long, we carry forward into our movement. So if we sit a lot, it's not good for us, because it switches off some of the main muscles involved in running, which is our glutes, our buttocks, and our hip flexors. And there's a good example in the book of how that affects some sporting movement as well, because not only is Shane a running technique coach and an expert in the field of running technique, but he also is an expert in the field of human movement generally, and he's worked with lots of organisations, including the British diving squad. And there's an example or an anecdote in the book about how he spotted one of the divers' movements once she was going towards and jumping off the edge of the board, the high board. I think it was Grace Reed was the diver in particular, where her right foot was turned out slightly, which affected how her takeoff and therefore her spins and what have you during the dive. And Shane noticed that during the day she'd tend to stand with her arms crossed on one leg with the right foot turned out, and that transfers into the actual movement of her dives. So working on that helped. And it's the same for all of us. That's why Shane suggests that sitting all day is not great, and in time sitting will probably be viewed like smoking in terms of its ill effects on our health. And standing desks and getting up and being active are much better than sitting all day long. Because let's face it, most of us, myself included, have desk jobs. We sit all day long, and we might travel to different places sitting in a car or on a bus or in a train, and when we come home from the work or whatever, we'll sit and watch TV or sit and have dinner. So we're sitting an awful lot of the time, and it isn't really good for us. Our bodies aren't designed for sitting, they're designed for movement. So I do really recommend the book. I think it's a really good, interesting read. It's got some fabulous little anecdotes and examples in there. But in terms of learning running technique from a book, that's something I don't think is necessarily the best option for most people. And I say this does have everything in there you need, but learning from a book how to move your body is never going to be the best option, really, because you need to be able to see yourself moving, understand how you move now, and understand how you need to move to improve that. And that's really difficult to get from a book. You need to be able to see recorded video evidence of yourself, if you like, and work with somebody that actually can interpret that and give you constructive feedback on how to work on what you're like now to what you want to be like in terms of improvements. So yeah, and the same goes for all the other books I have on running technique. They are good. They certainly explain a lot, but in terms of actually working on something like that by yourself, it's not the best way of doing things. That's what I'm saying. So that's really it for now. And if you found this video useful, then please give it a thumbs up and click on the subscribe button as well as the notification bell, and that way you'll get notified of my future videos when they're updated and uploaded to YouTube. And if you have any questions or comments about this video, then please post those below and I will reply to you as soon as I can. And until my next video, happy running.